Welcome to part 2, operational design. In the last session, we mentioned operational design as a part of operational art. In this session, we'll discuss what operational design is. As a note, joint doctrine uses the term operational design, while the U.S. Army calls it the Army Design Methodology, or ADM. While there are slight differences, the concepts are the same, and this discussion applies to both. Operational design is a technique that assists commanders in applying operational art. It is a tool to help them to understand, visualize, and develop approaches to problem solving. Operational design has 3 elements: understanding the environment, defining the problem, and developing an operational approach. Operational design is built around these 4 questions listed here. Everything else is just TTP. The first task is to understand the environment, so we ask 2 main questions. First, what is going on in the environment? It's a way to think about this is the acronym RAFT, which stands for relationships, actors, functions, and tensions. It's a simple way to view the environment as a system, and I'll describe RAFT in more detail later. The goal of this question is to understand the relevant environment as well as possible. The second question, what do we want the environment to look like? It's a description of the environment of how we want it to be. This description generally comes from higher authorities and is expressed in missions, intents, and policy objectives. The third question is simply, what is the problem? It is asking, what is the difference between the current environment and the desired environment? Whatever is preventing change is the problem. The last question is, how do we get from the current environment to our desired environment? This prompts the commanders to envision possible solutions to solve the problem and reach the desired end state. It simply asks, how do we solve the problem, or what is our solution? You'll notice each question quadrant shows both a graphic and a narrative. We recommend that design practitioners communicate their analysis in both graphic and narrative forms. Each has its strengths and weaknesses, but together they complement one another. Graphics can be easily understood visuals, but they lack explanation. Narratives can contain detailed explanation, but requires time to study. And for those reasons, we encourage using both. In the next 3 slides, I'll go over each of the questions in more detail. This figure is from Joint Publication 5.0 dated August 2011. It shows that the first step in operational design is understanding the environment. Designers should describe both the current state and the desired state, which were our questions 1 and 2. This is a holistic look using a systems perspective of the environment. This process can involve standard information gathering techniques, such as the estimate process, the intelligence preparation of the operational environment, or a description of the political, economic, military, social, information, and infrastructure systems. Some of these inputs required to understand the environment are listed on the slide. Now here is a key point. This is where operational art's understanding comes from. This is the step. This step asks, what is the context in which the operation will be executed? Key questions include, what is going on? Why has this situation developed? What does it mean? And what is the real story? A way to think about describing the environment is RAFT, which is a simple heuristic for a systems perspective. It is the description of the relationships between the relevant actors and the functions of those relationships, and then the tensions which characterize the relationship. This is not doctrine, but rather a way to start framing the environment. It is a framework to help describe the environment. Again, think the relationships between the actors, the functions of those relationships, and any tensions that characterize the nature of the relationship. Now, there is no prescribed format for the outputs of this step, but we do recommend graphics and narratives. This is question number 3, the problem identification step. Now, it's important to note that the problem can be singular or it can be plural. In this step, you strive to identify the underlying causes and not just the symptoms. Now, this is easy to say, but it's certainly not easy to do. The challenge is to identify what in the current environment is preventing changing the environment to the desired environment. The actual identification of the true problem is the main objective of operational design. Failure to identify the true problem results in an operational approach that potentially treats symptoms and not the disease. The basic questions are, what needs to change? What doesn't need to change? What is missing and needs to be provided? What behaviors need to change? Or what must be removed? What are the opportunities and threats to the strengths and weaknesses? What conditions need to exist for success? These types of questions help identify the true problem. And once you know what the problem is, then you can start on a solution. Now, there is no prescribed format for a problem statement. However, it should be clear, concise, and focused on the root problem. We've identified the problem, now we need to remove it. In the operational approach step, we develop a broad concept of actions, conditions, and criteria that should solve the problem. Now, an operational approach is closer to a mission statement in that it describes what must be done rather than how to do it. It is a conceptualization of the broad general actions. Think missions and objectives that will produce the conditions that define the desired end state. It starts by asking, how will the problem be solved? Generally, there are 3 broad ways to solve a problem. I'll call RCP. R is remove. If the problem is not required in the desired environment, remove it. C is for change. If the problem is required, then you attempt to change its behavior so that it is no longer an obstacle. P is provide. The problem may be something is missing, a requirement that the environment needs, so provide it. An operational approach may include any combination of RCP type actions. Remember, the operational approach shapes the mission and a broad concept of the operation. It also provides the details that will shape the commander's guidance and intent. It is the commander's description of what needs to be done, not how to do it. But the design process is not finished when the development of the operational approach is done. In the environment, everything is dynamic. There are actors with reactions and counteractions. The environment is subject to change agents that may behave in unpredictable ways. Therefore, commanders and staffs throughout planning and execution continually use design to assess and reassess facts, assumptions, observation, and their analysis to understand the changing environment and the need for changing approaches. This reassessment is also called reframing. Reassessing generally has 3 triggers. A major event causes a catastrophic change in the environment, or it could be a planned periodic review, or the understanding changes based on reflection or assessment of existing problems in the operational approach. Now we'll discuss design products. Again, we recommend both graphics and narratives to convey the information in a clear and concise way. The products listed here help explain the current and desired environment, end states, and problems. These could be anything from lists and biographical data on key actors, to diagrams on infrastructure networks, to system capabilities. Some might be RAF or PMISI products. But from these products, the commander and the staff clearly identify the problem and describe when, where, and what actions to use to solve the problem. The main output or result of operational design is the operational approach, which is the foundation of the commander's initial planning guidance and intent. The commander's guidance provides the focus of operations by defining and linking the desired conditions to potential combinations of actions that may achieve the objective. It provides the purpose of the operation. And lastly, it provides the staff broad guidance on specific areas that may include, but are not limited to, the lines of operation or effort, information integration, resources, and risk. Here are some examples of operational approaches. Remember, the operational approach is a broad conceptualization of the general actions that will produce the conditions that define the desired end state. Maps, lines of effort, Greek temples, free-drawn sketches, they all work. Remember, the point is to clearly and simply convey the approach. Now here's a warning. Just because an example in JP50 uses a line of effort type graphic does not mean that is the prescribed format. Each situation is unique, as is each commander. Critical thinkers will develop their own products and graphics to fit their situation rather than trying to fit the situation to a template. Now let's return to the question on the differences between an operational approach and a course of action. The operational approach is a broad statement that focuses on what to do. Think the big W. It should answer most of these questions on the left side of the slide. A course of action takes a mission and figures out how to accomplish it. Think big H. Of course, we acknowledge overlap between the two, and in reality, both contain whats and hows. So the difference is weighing the big W and the big H type questions. This concludes this segment, and in the next walkthrough, we'll discuss the center of gravity.